This is Digital Marketing Depot, broadcasting live. I'm Karen Burka, your webinar producer. Thank you for joining us today for Google's Black Box Bidding Solution, a look under the hood. We are very pleased to welcome Ginny Marvin, Editor-in-Chief at Third Door Media, and Andreas Reiffen, the CEO of Crealytics. Now, before I turn the webinar over to our speakers, I want to tell all of you a couple of things. If you need some help or have a question for our speakers, just use the Q&A box, and we will do our best to help you. If you want to learn more about our sponsor, Crealytics, or Digital Marketing Depot, there are some widgets at the bottom of your screen. Just click on them, and they will take you where you want to go. Remember that you can customize your audience console to move or resize any windows that you have open. So we're going to hear a lot of great content today, and I wanted to let you know we are recording this broadcast, and we will make it available for viewing on demand this afternoon. I'll send an email out when it's ready. All right, with that business taken care of, let me make some more formal introductions. Ginny Marvin manages day-to-day editorial operations across all of Third Door's publications. She writes about paid online marketing topics, including search, social, display, and retargeting for Search Engine Land, Marketing Land, and MarTech Today. With more than 15 years of marketing experience, Ginny has held both in-house and agency management positions. Andreas Reiffen is an entrepreneur, marketing technologist, an expert in data-driven advertising. His company, Crealytics, works exclusively in the retail sector and offers a holistic approach to search, shopping, and paid social campaigns. Andreas is a regular speaker at industry events around the world. Now, audience, you can see more complete bios and contact information for our speakers on the left side of your console. Remember that if you have questions for our industry experts, please make good use of that Q&A box. I'll get to as many of those questions live after the formal presentation. So today we're going to start off with about 15 minutes of a roundtable discussion with both Ginny and Andreas about where we've been, where we are, and where we are going in paid search. So we're going to get started with a little bit of a look of the evolution of online marketing. And I'm going to start off by asking our speakers a couple of questions about it. So Andreas, welcome to the webinar, and I wonder if you can start us off by describing the early days of Google AdWords.
Thanks, Karen. Of course I can, and I think it always depends on when exactly you got into the industry. In my case, I remember it was in 2006, and I did an internship at a South African search specialist called Click to Customers. And these guys were working as PPC super affiliates, like applying through affiliate networks at different e-commerce companies and running then large-scale campaigns on a performance basis. What I saw there when I had arrived, that it was the time when the first bidding system started to emerge, but most companies did still manual bidding, and usually teams at that point of time were really large because you had to do keyword research, you had to write your ad copies, you had to test them. So it was a quite long-running manual thing you had to do with lots of repetitive tasks. When we then started with Crealytics, or even pre-Crealytics as affiliates, I do remember I had lots of working students helping to sort out the keywords, and compared to today, I think you needed less analytical skills. You didn't need any programming skills. It was mainly, you were mainly relying on headcount, and this has changed quite a lot. I don't know, Ginny, when you got into the industry, but this was what I saw in 2006 when I started.
Yeah, we have very similar experiences. I started in search marketing in 2005, and it was the days of Overture. But like you, the experience of a lot of people having to do a lot of grunt work was the standard, and I remember people dedicated to keyword research. And then once you finalize your keyword research, the laborious work of breaking those and organizing them into ad groups, and And then measurement was such a big challenge. I mean, there was this great, the euphoria about being able to track clicks, immediately and see people active on your landing pages, but taking that through all the way to conversion was still really challenging. So, from an evolution standpoint, I'd say the nature of the work has completely changed to become much more strategic, and part of that is due to the fact that there's automation for a lot of these things, but also our measurement systems and capabilities have become so much more sophisticated.
So, Ginny, let's keep going there. Why do you think Google pivoted from text ads to PLAs? I think there are a few reasons. I think one reason is, and I would say they didn't necessarily pivot, they augmented. So the text ads were still there. They just doubled up with a new format, and being able to monetize images was a fantastic opportunity. You've got all these retailers and merchants who already have their product images on hand, sitting on their websites, and being able to just port those into a feed and create ads out of them was fairly easy and kind of ripe for monetization. And it also, gave, from a retailer standpoint, the ability to really quickly and easily advertise every product in their catalog. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Andreas.
Yeah, I think in the end, Google cares about two things. One is user value, and the other one is, of course, as a public company, it's revenue and scale. And when Google started, initially it was obvious. You were searching for products, and then you had to click on an ad to bridge the gap and finally get to the product you want to buy. So this was kind of a weird user experience as well, and Google then at some point decided, let's just show the products. And what they then saw is that the click-through rates of the product images are way higher than the click-through rates on the text ads, which means users just like product ads much more. And at the same time, of course, this brings way more money in if more organic traffic is then funneled through ads. And in the end, it helped a lot to make the whole system way more efficient. Instead of people researching keywords and grouping them and writing text ads, you just pulled the images into the SERPs. And this is why we saw such a massive growth. And text ads are stagnating or even shrinking, and PLAs are now at 80%, which if you take a look at also where you're spending your time today, most in-house teams or even agencies tend to spend still 80% of their time on the 20% text ad traffic and 20% time where they truly make the money. So it clearly shows that this PLA system is way more efficient from different perspectives, from the user perspective, from an advertiser perspective, and of course also from Google's perspective. And this is why they have been pushing it that much.
So Andreas, how did things change once Google Shopping was introduced?
First of all, it was a whole new world, and it changed our industry quite a lot. There were new companies emerging with specialized tools focused on feed optimization or focused on the bidding part of things, because it was a whole new game. So instead to run your shopping campaigns, you had to upload a feed. But in the early days, this was not enough, because you had to deal with how you named your product. And if you called your product, whatever, laptop instead of notebook, and people were searching for notebooks, you didn't show up. So there was a whole new world around the feed optimization piece. And then Google kind of simplified the problem, because you didn't have to upload lots of keywords, but keywords were still triggering the PLAs. And now you could only bid on a keyword level, but what you actually wanted is differentiate between user intent, strong user intent, like someone searching for a specific product, and not so strong intent, someone searching for generics like dresses. And the industry had to figure out how to actually do this in that new world. So it cost additional work in the early days, but now all the different systems have become much smarter, and we see that big shift in how you now staff teams and how you actually run this with a clear, probably increased importance of measurability and things like attribution, for example.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that the change also, I mean, it introduced a whole new sector and area of specialization in search marketing. And I would also say it kind of ties together the search experience with the on-site merchandising experience that needs to happen. And so from a knowledge base perspective, search marketers who work in Google Shopping really had to figure out and get the language of how to optimize for product-specific listings. And a lot of that tied back to how the pages themselves were or are optimized on the sites. And so there was that kind of merging of those two disciplines that really we hadn't seen before.
Maybe one important additional point, we also saw that price became much more important. So the whole move towards Google Shopping made the market way more transparent, and we know that in the end, Google Shopping is a sort of price comparison platform. So it made prices across different merchants way more transparent, and it also put pressure on retailers' margins to some extent, which which we didn't see in the very early days.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Really, really good point.
Great. So you're both talking a lot about machine learning. Andreas, I mean, we hear a lot right now about artificial intelligence and automated bidding. You know, when did that start, and how has that impacted the market?
That's a bit funny because we are hearing this just now, and now everyone talks about machine learning and AI. The reality, though, is that this is nothing new. In 2006, we already had the first bidding systems, and if you want, this was also AI machine learning. It was just called bidding tool at that point of time. So I don't feel there's too much new in here. Of course, we have more advanced solutions, and technology has made progress, but in the end, that's pretty much the same, and we just love these, the hype about these new things.
I agree with you, although I would say, you know, I think one of the reasons this is getting so much hype is because of the constant discussions about balance between automation versus manual control. And that's where we've seen a lot of change and evolution in the platforms for wresting manual control away from the practitioners, campaign managers. And so that's, you know, it's really been a fairly dramatic shift in how we approach campaign management.
So from all that machine learning, let's talk a little bit about what marketing teams will look like then, and then we're going to get into where we're going with that. But Andreas, what were the marketing teams like in the early days?
I can kind of compare our own structure at Crealytics. When we started in the very early days, we had larger teams, and teams consisted of paid search professionals. If we take a look how we staff projects today, there's a blend of paid search professionals. Then we have data analysts, data scientists in there, and we also have developers working on scripts or product features. And I think this pretty much reflects what we see in the entire industry. We heard, it was roughly a year ago, that Zalando in Germany laid off around about 200 people. But what they did, in fact, they changed their team composition, because at the same time they were hiring data scientists and more developers. So if you run a search team today, you have paid search professionals, you have developers, and you have data scientists. And this is, from what I see, the biggest change. So lower headcount, different composition of the team.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing similar evolution in on the agency and in-house marketing teams as well. In that we did a survey earlier this year from agencies, and the skills that agencies are looking for are in the data science analytics realm. And so we're just exactly to your point, Andreas, seeing a shift away from tactical specializations to strategic and data science-focused disciplines.
Yep.
All right. So let's take a look then at where we are today and the status quo. So, Andreas, maybe you can describe the current state of automation in search.
Yeah, of course. So on the one hand, we have lots of third-party bidding tools from different providers. They're all quite well known in the market. In addition to these, lately we saw tools coming from the platforms themselves. Especially Google has been really pushing their own bidding solutions called ROAS, and also solutions called smart bidding, which is eCPC and stuff like that. So we see the field changing, and actually trying the platforms trying to also gain control and help advertisers to better optimize campaigns. And this is a little bit different. When you go a few years back, you still had a portion of companies running everything through manual bidding, some others through third-party bidding systems, but none actually ever used the publishers or platforms like Google and Amazon. And at that point of time, people were quite convinced that this would never ever actually happen, because there's a conflict of interest. As Google, Amazon, Facebook, you want to, of course, drive your own revenue, which is not necessarily the same goal. As an advertiser, you might want to decrease your budget in order to maximize profitability. But in the end, I think things have become so complex that lots of companies just struggle getting the bidding right, with so many signals being available, and hence the platforms have jumped in, coming up with their own solutions as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest changes we're seeing right now is the platform's own bidding systems, and what that's doing in terms of how people execute on their own goals. And it's everything from bidding, but that also then impacts the way, at least the way that Google's orchestrated it, but that then impacts the way that you're able to test your ad copy as well, if we're going to talk about text ads specifically. So it is everything from bid strategies and how those align with your own goals, being kind of, really need to be thinking about how that all works, because in fact, even though the promise is that they're going to alleviate the pain points of manual bidding. the flip side is there's a complexity in the analysis that you need to do to make sure that it's that the bidding systems are actually aligning with the goals of your business. So, I think it's really one of these things that is changing the nature of the way that we need to approach our campaigns and efforts in this area.
Well, so it sounds like yep. And so, Andreas, I mean, it sounds like there's good news, bad news there for marketers. Do you want to tell us what you think about that?
That's a good question. I think I talk to lots of companies in the space, and some believe it's the best thing which could ever happen. Some others are rather concerned. So, and I think the time horizon you take into account can answer the question, because if you think very short term, this might be a great thing. Let's say old school brick and mortar company, not really specialized in online advertising, and you were just following the big guys, and they were always ahead because they had the better bidding algorithms and smarter people, and so you were in a disadvantage. And now, as these new systems are being released, it's great news, because you can be equally good as the others, and you would probably, if you hop onto such a more sophisticated system from the platforms, if you hop onto it, you probably will perform much better than you did before in your manual bidding efforts. If you think long term, what will happen is that marketing just in the standard way won't be a differentiator anymore. So every company will use the same bidding. The only thing you will be able to do is upload your product, so kind of make the products you sell available to Google, and everyone in the market will do exactly the same, which levels the playing field and puts additional pressure on prices, which is the least thing the market now needs. So I think it's long run rather a threat for the market if this happens, or at least, let's phrase it in a different way, puts pressure on companies to come up with things to still differentiate themselves, something we'll cover a little bit down the road this webinar.
Ginny, anything you want to add to that in terms of good news, bad news?
Yeah, I agree with Andreas, and I would just kind of echo what I was saying before, that there are different considerations that marketers need to take into play when your bidding's being automated by the platform that you are buying ads from, and not in a conspiracy theory manner, but just by the very nature of the fact that the platform that you're buying from is the one that is optimizing, reporting on how that optimization is doing, means that there is a level of scrutiny that all marketers should have on that performance and what those outcomes actually look like from the bottom line business end for their companies.
Well, we've actually yeah, and so for both of you, I want to throw this question out there from our attendee already. If the platforms are creating their own bid strategy solutions, which we've been talking about, does that contribute to a higher CPC?
I mean, what would happen initially is that let's assume that a bidding system coming from the platform at some point will be superior to anything which is available in the market, which, by the way, is a big question mark. Will this happen? But let's assume this will happen. In this case, the first one hopping onto the system will, of course, see a higher return on investment. If he sees a higher return on investment, what will he do? Of course, he will pour more budget into the channel. So the others, not yet engaging with that new bidding system, will hop on it as well and will see a performance increase, hence will increase their bids. At some point, of course, this increased demand for clicks, while Google has just to offer so many clicks overall, this will inflate the cost per click. So on the long run, the playing field will level out again, and we will end up in a situation where the CPC will be higher, but also we will get more sales in for this for a single click. So I think for the advertisers long run, this won't move the needle that much, but on the Google side, as the targeting could be more efficient, there could come more money in this way, while still keeping the advertiser value on a similar level as of today.
Yeah, I guess I would kind of flip the question also, because yes, we want to be monitoring CPCs, but that's not the KPI that we want to be looking at. So if your CPCs go up because of bidding, but the optimization means that your return is higher, then you won't really care, right? So it becomes a question of how these strategies or bidding solutions impact your revenue goals is where, I would say that's where you need to focus your attention and think about it from that perspective.
All right,
maybe
great. Well, so then
add something to that.
Go ahead, Andreas.
If the CPC increases, what will probably happen, and I totally agree, Ginny, with what you just mentioned, it's not necessarily bad, but because it could happen that the efficiency gain of better targeting is so high that you don't need 5 clicks anymore to convert a client, to convert a customer and make the sale. So in the end, you should care about the return. So if we reverse the question, it is rather, will the return grow on the long run? And this is the thing where I don't believe this is ever going to happen, because if the ROI increases, competition will pick up. And at some point, everyone is spending as much as he can afford to make things profitable. And so in the end, this won't be the greatest thing for the retailers. It will definitely help Google, but at some point the ROI will kind of circle back to where it is today.
Yeah. Great. So given all these market complexities, let's take a couple of minutes to talk about the future, and namely, how do marketing organizations, given all of these market dynamics, gain competitive advantages in the future, and what will the best-in-class marketing team look like, and how will that be different from what we've already talked about? So Andreas, maybe you want to give us your thoughts first?
Yeah, and I would just refer to what Ginny mentioned before, because that's exactly what I believe. The rules of the game or the drivers in this game will change. Before it was research the better keywords, write the better ads, be more smart in computing your bids. At some point, if the bidding solutions come from the platform, the playing field is completely leveled. So the question will be, what is this high-end AI optimizing for? And if you're not so smart, you would just take the numbers as they come from the platforms and feed them back in the standard way. So the system captures conversions and will optimize based on what it sees. But what you buy is totally different stuff. You can buy prospecting in search. You can buy lower funnel retargeting. The value of these is entirely different, but a sale will always pop up as a sale. And as Ginny mentioned, without any conspiracy, of course, the rules of the game are, I'm a publisher and I want to maximize my revenue. So I don't have any incentive of kind of deflating the numbers which come into the system. So the holy grail will be how to accurately measure what's really happening, feeding these KPIs back into whatever bidding system. I don't believe it makes a big difference. Today we have dozens of different bidding solutions out there. One might be 5% better than the other one. The thing in fact, has always been ingesting the right metrics into these systems, but now it's gaining importance because that's the only thing which is left to you where you can actually differentiate yourselves. And that's, I think, where the whole thing is going, which will further increase the need for data scientists and probably decrease the need for very large teams of paid search experts.
I agree. I mean, I think that the analytic skills, data science skills that are going to be needed, those are going to be key differentiators. And whether that's, you hire your own team in-house, or you're using consultants, or you've got a great partner that you can work with, I think that is going to be such a key part in helping companies really understand and understand what's happening and differentiate themselves from their competitors. Is going to be from an analytics standpoint. And executing on those, being able to execute on those findings. Yeah.
So, Andreas, you've given us this very interesting quote. We're going to kind of wrap up our roundtable part of the webinar here, and then I'm going to let you comment on it, and then you're going to give us some best practices, for our audience in terms of dealing with automation and artificial intelligence.
Thank you. This is actually my favorite quote because it describes the current state of our industry in the best way. Most companies want to optimize their revenue based on a given budget. Sounds all logical, but if you do this in a very efficient way, you run fast, but unfortunately, you usually run into the wrong direction. Why? Because it's not about revenue. You have to care about how many products are being returned. You have to care about margins. Makes a huge difference whether you sell a laptop with a 5% margin or whether you sell whatever underwear at a 70% margin. In the same manner, you don't want to sell just to existing customers. Revenue to existing customers is not worth as much as revenue you make with new customers. So the whole industry today is talking about bidding solutions and how to squeeze out 5% more revenue from a given budget. But that's not the question. So, and it's great that we're having this discussion about new bidding tools because this finally brings us to the right question, which is what should we actually optimize for? And in the end, as Ginny and I already mentioned, it's going to be all about the measurability piece, and things get way more complex. But we will have a similar situation with first movers in the market getting exactly this right, and others just relying on whatever machine learning system, but feeding the wrong numbers into these systems. So on the subsequent slides, I'm going to walk you through all these topics a little bit. We have a very, very tight schedule here, so I'm trying to rush through, and if and I might leave a few slides out. So the measurement piece. Let's take a look at what happened in the years from, let's say, 2005 till today. When I started, we were getting paid a CPO in affiliate networks. Whatever order we drove, we got a fixed amount of money, no matter whether we sold something at $5 or $500. Of course, this did not make really sense because you make more money from the more expensive products. So you want to push these products. So someone had the brilliant idea to rather pay affiliates based on a rev share. So then companies were aiming to maximize revenues out of a given budget, which is still the most common approach. But, and I'm quite confident here, it's definitely not the right approach. And in very, very few cases when this is being done, this truly makes sense. It didn't take very long that the next smart guy came in and said, yeah, but revenue is nice to have, but my laptops just have a margin of 5%, something else has a higher margin. Why don't we work on an ROI where we forget about the top line revenue and just take into account the true margins? And as soon as this was implemented at some companies, they figured out, yeah, nice, but what I really want is sell also to new customers, because if I sell a shopping basket of $100 to customer A, who is already an existing customer, and $100 to customer B, who's a new one, I can expect that this new customer B will make repeat purchases over time. So I'm willing to spend more money for that new guy. No bidding system can do this if you don't tell it that there's more value. So we need to quantify the value of orders. In the end, each order generated by paid search or any other marketing channel contains products. These products contain margins, and then we have costs related to the specific order, which is shipping and packaging and payment and all that stuff. And finally, there are products being returned. And in the end, there is some value contribution from each sale happening. Anyone in the market who's not capable of measuring this exact impact is not doing the best job on the search side, no matter how well the keywords and ads are tweaked. Something similar happened on the attribution side. At the beginning, it was all last click. Still today, the majority of companies work on last click, while there's no reason to do so. At some point, there were attribution systems available, and they took into account several touch points and usually used flat distribution or U-shaped allocation of credits to different clicks in the customer journey, or even a little bit more advanced time decay models. So a click recently would count more than a click which happened weeks ago. And at a later stage, the refinement was then algorithmic attribution, where smarter, more complex algorithms try to figure out how to actually assign credits from the order to individual clicks in the customer journey. And what then happened, and just recently actually, is that more and more companies started doing so-called incrementality tests. So setting up tests where you show ads to one segment of customers and you don't show ads to the other segment of customers, and then taking a look at how much more revenues the cohorts who see ads actually make. And it turned out that the attribution is usually not necessarily in line with what you see on the incrementality side. So apparently attribution helps to assign clicks to individual points in the customer journey, but it not necessarily is in line with the true impact of channels. The most prominent example is display retargeting. If you measure display retargeting through an attribution system, usually this channel will get too many credits because retargeting generates loads of clicks. But if you don't show these ads, most of these people would have bought anyway. So in an incrementality test, retargeting gets usually less than a 5% incrementality. And this is hard to reflect with attribution only. So what we what we want to get to is we want to combine attribution and incrementality. What you see here on this chart, the y-axis. And we want to get to the upper right square here, where we are able on the one hand to measure the value of orders. On the other hand, we want to know how much impact did our ads actually have? How incremental were they? And what you can do is combine both things, attribution and incrementality, to get close to what you see in reality and still feed these numbers back into digital media systems. So one example why a customer lifetime value-centric approach makes sense, or where the difference actually lies. So here are three different scenarios. So as an advertiser, I can say, I care about my first order, and I want to maximize the profit on the first order. So what I need to do is invest cautiously and try to get to drive margins at the lowest price point. So what I will do, in fact, is mainly target existing customers because these are the cheapest I can buy. So in this example, I would make 2 million in profit based on the first order, and I still will win some new customers. So over time, 12 months and 24 months, my profit might ramp up to 4 million. What I could also do, and let's just take the other extreme, I can be more aggressive. I could say, I don't mind what my first order profit is. What's important to me is that I get the maximum growth rate over 2 years. So I can invest way more heavily, and my first order will be highly unprofitable. So instead of making a 2 million plus on the first sale, I will incur a loss of 3 million. But I will win lots of new customers because the optimization will be tweaked not on chasing down existing customers, but mainly acquire new ones and identify the ones out there who will be loyal and make several repeat purchases. If I do this, I then have a stronger ramp up of profit over time, and out of the 3 million loss I would get, I could get potential 8 million profit over 24 months. So what this slide says is the strategy you should pick depends on the time horizon and the strategy of the company. If I want to exit a business and have a short time horizon, I might want to optimize for the first order, get things profitable. If I want to grow as fast as possible and still profitable, over the long run, I rather take this approach with a 24-month time horizon because I can actually make a much bigger impact compared to this moderate investment to maximize first order profitability. So this is essentially the problem we are going to solve in the future. And it's not a question which algorithm I use in the first place. It's a business problem I need to solve. So what happens if you apply this methodology? And we've actually started doing that sort of stuff a long time ago. It was probably a little bit too early because the market was not ready for doing this. But the results are pretty consistent across the board with many different clients where we've tested this. And let's take a look at ad spend first. In 2011, this was rather small, and then we saw it heavily ramping up until 2013. You see this on the left-hand side. If we take a look at the column on the right, not the middle one, we see the new customer rate. So the proportion of sales coming from new customers. And we see that it went up by 58% over the initial period. So the focus on new customers and taking into account expected repeat purchases kind of implies a budget reallocation away from existing customers towards rather the acquisition of new customers. And some might ask themselves, why did it go down then again or stabilized? It's because at some point it's just not possible driving even a higher ratio of new customers. In this specific case, the market penetration of this business was already really high. So there's at some point no way to further increase it. But you can imagine through the additional new customer rate here, lots of more new customers came in, and the business is now living from all these new customers and their repeat purchases. Something which would not have happened in a world where we try to maximize profitability on the first order. So just very briefly, what's technically going on under the hood here. These bubbles you see here could be brands or product categories. And we have a scenario before doing CLV related bidding and after implementing that bidding. And the bubbles you see here change not only their position, but also the size. So the bubble size could be the revenue you make out of a certain brand. And if you see, for example, let's take just one, bubble A has a ROAS of 4.5 or something, and an ROI at 0.3. And then you see on the right-hand side, apparently there was a de-investment happening because this brand probably didn't bring in as many new customers. So the revenue went down, budget was pulled away and allocated somewhere else. For example, bubble H grew from small to rather large. So under the hood, if you do this, you will shift budgets away from selling to existing customers, selling low margin products at high return rates, towards more targeting new customers and trying to get the high margin products across. So let's assume this is the strategy going forward. So we move away from ROAS and we rather focus on a CLV approach. What this does is it kind of relies on the belief that you will win your money back because you incur losses as of today and you want to still make money over the lifetime. And that's, let's follow the first chart on the top, expectation. So you invest a 50 million, you make 100 million in revenue, you have a 45% margin, so 45 million in margin after returns in this case. Then there are some new customers which have a monetary value, which then sums up to a 65 million. And you assume that this activity has an 80% incrementality. So it means that if you cut off the ads, you would lose 80% of the revenue. So in fact, you rather estimate that it's not 65 was truly coming in, 65 was truly coming in, but only 52 roughly. So you end up with some profitability here over time. What if the reality is that incrementality is not 80%, but only 40%? In this case, you will never ever make the money back. And this is exactly the big risk if you do this. On the one hand, we need to go CLV because that's the way we can actually drive value to the business and perform better than some companies using the basic strategies. At the same time, if you're not really good in measuring and you think you get much more than you get in fact, you end up with a damage. Let's skip this one. So what you need to do is test incrementality across all major channels. And if you run an attribution system, you can compare the value contribution across different channels with what you see from your incrementality analysis. So attribution model 1, you can test and see how well does it fit with what you saw in your incrementality test. And you see pretty large gaps here. Yeah, Facebook 5 to 15. This is not a perfect fit. Attribution model 2 also has rather large gaps, and you might tweak and change things retrospectively and find some setting in your attribution model which gets you close to what you see in the incrementality test. So the philosophy here is do not rely too much just on the attribution, but rather test incrementality and then close the gaps to your attribution. So why do you need an attribution system? The key reason here is you need it because you need to assign individual credits to individual clicks so that this is biddable. Incrementality analysis just work on a large aggregate level. All right. So let's take a look at how you can actually implement this. The first thing you need to do is enhance your tracking. If you only track revenue, you just need to track margins. You have to track back returns and cancellations and feed it back into your system, and you have to track new customers and assign a value to these. These are the basics, and you need to start with it. Second thing is test incrementality across all major channels, and then do what I just described. Try to find a setting in your attribution system so that the gap between attribution and incrementality is as small as possible. And in the end, you make all this actionable because you ingest attributed data, including profit margins, new customers. So essentially, at this final step, you would see all this in your stats in whatever bidding system you use. And this way, you make sure that you have efficient AI working on refined KPIs and actually doing what you want them to do, compared to having high-end AI with crappy data in there, which won't solve the problem. A few points on ROAS. Let's skip a few slides because we're running out of time. So ROAS is very promising long run. I think it's still very early days, and there's still some weaknesses, especially when it comes to new customer optimization, audience control. But the key thing, and we talked about it, is you need to ingest your own data into the system, and there are ways to do so. So facilitate the AI to work on your real KPIs, on the numbers you believe in and you've measured. A second thing is you can structure your campaigns in a multitude of different ways and help ROAS to perform better. So you need to figure out what the best way of doing this actually is. Then exception management. You don't want to run everything on the same targets because you might run promotions. This is not automatically built into the system. So you need to find ways to actually leverage this and make use of this. And last but not least, we mentioned this, it's all coming down to price. So what you can do now is start changing prices and measure price elasticity through Google. So a price change as of today will immediately result in a volume increase. And there's a fantastic way now available to actually become better in pricing. I skip 2 slides, but I let you know what this is about. So if you want to test ROAS against your incumbent bidding system, we do recommend, as of today, not using drafts and experiments, but rather using a geo approach. The reason why we suggest to not use drafts and experiments is that with the complex account structures where you split between existing and new customers, the traffic allocation, randomization doesn't work properly. So when ROAS in one test was discontinued, we saw a jump of clicks of 143% on the existing customers bucket. You would expect 100%. On the new customers, this actually worked well. I could explain why. Who's interested can get back to me, but for the sake of time, I'm continuing. We had a second thing. The draft experiments used dynamic attribution, and what we saw is once the test was ended, we got 100% more clicks, but we got 121% more conversions. What this means is that apparently low funnel clicks are favored, and if ROAS goes after low funnel audiences, it will look better on DDA, but that's not necessarily what you want if you want to drive incremental sales. So test it in a more reliable environment, or wait until these early bugs of the system might be fixed. So what we are currently doing is testing ROAS in every aspect. So first one is a geo-split test where we compare DDA and draft experiments with this geo-targeting approach to see what's the most reliable way to measure performance. Then we'd like to understand how the system reacts to target KPI change, or to target changes. So if you want to hit a tighter ROAS and you make the adjustment, how long does it until the system actually learns, and is it worth changing things immediately? There are different ways to set up campaigns, different structures. That's another topic we're going to test. We would like to see how the system reacts to refined data input, how you can control audiences, like if you don't want to target low funnel audiences, what can you do to manipulate this? And finally, how can we do pricing? These are all things which are currently in the pipeline. We're going to have a second webinar where we talk about all these things and show some of the results. And I'm handing back to Karen because we have 4 minutes left.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas. That was a lot of great information that we packed into our webinar. We do have some audience questions. We're not going to have a lot of time, but let's see if we can get to one, and we can bring Ginny Marvin back in here to give her opinion on this question. So we're going to put this first question up. Andreas, so how would you structure an incrementality test within paid search? We have tried and have had trouble seeing a significant difference in results.
So first of all, it does not surprise me because that's exactly what happened to us at the beginning as well. And we used an approach in Google Analytics where you put together randomized audiences. And the problem, and I guess the one who is asking the question is referring exactly to this, is that these two groups already have such a big difference in performance that whether one group sees ad or not doesn't move the needle that much. So there's so much noise that you can see it. One thing we've done is instead of randomizing audiences and then showing just to 5% of these audiences actually ads, that we use a JavaScript randomizer. So only someone who actually sees an ad will assign to one of both audiences, which kind of narrows the whole thing down and helps that the two groups are not too noisy already. It's the short explanation. Happy to engage with the one who asked the question in more detail, because we've struggled with the same and came up with a much better solution now.
All right. Ginny, did you have something to add, or I think this is probably a little too tactical, but maybe you do.
No, I actually was just going to quickly follow up with a question for Andreas on that, following it, in terms of what you need in terms of volume, and if there are constraints depending on how much you sell and how much traffic you're getting to be able to do this effectively.
Yeah. So ideally, you would want to do this on the most granular level. So I mean, the perfect world, we want to do it for very, very small, narrow audiences. However, this is unrealistic, as the one who asked the question already indicated. So I would recommend to first run incrementality tests on whole channels. You can still split out brand if you don't want to test it in search, and then have the whole rest. And then once you've done this on the per channel level, try to break it down, and I would then always differentiate between prospecting and retargeting and measure this separately. These should be buckets which are large enough to get valid results out of this.
All right. Well, unfortunately, everyone, that is all the time we have today. It was a great webinar. And I want to thank Ginny and Andreas for very informative and timely presentations and pontificating for us on the future of search. And I want to thank you, our audience, for your great questions. We didn't have a lot of Q&A time because we had so much great content to share with you, but I want to let you know that all of the questions submitted today will be passed along to our friends at Crealytics, who I want to give a special shout out to for sponsoring our webinar today. And you can visit them, as you see here, at www.crealytics.com. That's all for our broadcast today. We look forward to seeing you next time, right here